Ahoy, you salty sailors. Time to raise anchor and set sail for your best scrawny life. Arr! It's been very dry. We had a little bit of rain early last week, and some maitake did come out. Here you can see these are groundwater seeps. So there is still some groundwater being held in this hillside. There's our big oak. We'll see if there's any fresh maitake worth picking. But in this particular case, I don't see any. But that's what we're looking for. The big white oaks.
It's late September, and the maitake season will continue all the way until the ground freezes in November.
So we've got a little maitake here. The base of this big old tree. It's not fresh. I don't think there's anything worth picking there. But, we'll continue on around the tree. See if there's anything else. So here's our first big valley. On the hillside opposite is a large groundwater seep. That's the one that has marsh marigolds and so forth in early spring during the walleye run. On the other side of that hill, there's another large valley that splits into two, and one of those is the legendary Valley of Hens. But as dry as it is, I don't think there's any point in making the effort to get over there.
Maitake being the Japanese name for Grifola frondosa, you might think that if it occurs in Japan and in the eastern U.S., that it would also occur in the western United States, or perhaps on the west coast, the Pacific Northwest, but unfortunately it does not.
So there's one. The bugs have pretty much destroyed it. But as you can see, it's a polypore. So it has this brown on top, but it has this pore surface underneath. Yeah, they've got all the good out of that one. But that's how you find them. Just find the big oaks. Look around the base. Here's another groundwater seep area at the base of the hill.
There are many groundwater seeps in this area due to the hilly nature of the terrain. Most are small, like this one here, but some can be as large as a dining room table and have, let's say, a gallon per minute or so of output.
So this is the stream coming out of that valley where we turned around. And because it's partially fed by groundwater seeps, the water will feel really cold. Yeah, the water feels nice and cold.
So rainwater is soaking into the topsoil and percolating down through the glacial till, down through the sandstone, down through the coal, where it's picking up that sulfur content it frequently has. But eventually it reaches the marl, where it can't really soak in or travel down any further, so it must run out. And that is what we see here. This gray stuff is marl, although it has a lot of algae growing on it. And you can see the water, although perhaps some water is soaked into it. It's reached a point where the water cannot penetrate into the marl. It's just simply running off of it. So the marl topography within the general topography is driving the groundwater seeps. Anyway, back on the river with a spunky little smallmouth. Paddling with one hand and casting with the other, that's the true sign of a hard-bitten river rat. A solid strip strike, and we are into a good one. That's the 7-weight fly rod, bent double there. Looks like a nice smallmouth. Not a certified beefcake here, but certainly a bronze jewel of the river, and once again, ever so grateful to the people who have made it possible for me to enjoy a nice day on the water like this. You really don't understand how good it is until you come to that point where you think you might not ever do it again. So a deep bend pool in the river, but I was not catching any fish from it. So I kept slowing down the retrieve, slower and slower, letting the fly drop deeper and deeper, and eventually did get a walleye. Not a giant, but a walleye nonetheless. And a small pike, so that completes the slam. None of them giants, but the slam nonetheless, a smallmouth, a walleye, and a pike.
So right where that riffle is now used to be the bank. The river made an S curve right there, and where that sandbar is, that was the riverbed, and it flowed across there and out into that bend. This was there was still sort of a low spot here, but it was much shallower. There wasn't continual water in it. It was just kind of backwater. But now the river has broken through the bend in that S curve and made this the main channel now.
So we're looking at the coal-marl boundary. Or we were looking at the coal-marl boundary until I got distracted by some pyrite. But that's the crystalline pyrite often occurs right at that edge, right at the meeting point of the marl and coal. The thing to understand, though, is that this crystalline form of pyrite is not stable in atmospheric conditions with rain and humidity cause it to deteriorate fairly quickly. So this does not represent a surface or a horizon where pyrite was laying around on the surface for a long period of time because it would have disintegrated. So although they are different strata, they're part of the same formation and are essentially contemporaneous. This is a different form of pyrite that doesn't seem to break down as quickly. Here you can see that brassy sheen that's typical of pyrite, and I suspect these kind of pillowy boulders are also composed of that same material. And you can see that at one point it was molten. It was the consistency of a thick pancake batter. Here you can see again that brassy sheen. So it's similar. Perhaps some silicon has gotten involved, would be the guess just off the top of my head. And the hematite found in the area sometimes it presents a similar mystery. And interestingly enough, you have an inorganic clay as well as plenty of coal and an iron ore all ready to hand in this area. Pretty good heavy little chunk right there. So everything you need for small scale iron production is pretty much to be found right within the area. You don't need much more than that, just a forced air mechanism. And of course the iron, which has become incorporated in the surrounding sediments, is what gives the red rock area its name. So it's little surprise that there's hematite here, but these hematite bubbles that are incorporated in these conglomerations of other rocks and sand are something of a mystery to me. They seem to only occur in a particular stratigraphic layer that's only exposed in a few places around the lake. This rippled texture indicates that this sandstone was deposited by flowing water. So this does represent a surface at some point in time. And as we can see, there are several such surfaces that make up this formation. Perhaps because the lime, the calcium carbonate, and so forth, that was precipitating out of solution along with the sand was hardening at that very time. We're beginning to, you'll remember that sandbank we saw earlier that was deposited as the river changed course and cut its way slightly deeper into the landscape. That sand is still sand, it hasn't turned into rock. This, on the other hand, turned into rock. So the water in this case came from a source where it was under much greater than 1 atmosphere of pressure. And it held a lot of dissolved calcium carbonate, but when it began flowing across the surface, it was likely under only 1 atmosphere of pressure, and so the calcium carbonate began precipitating out along with the sediment it was carrying. Later, the formation was buried by even more sediment and came under pressure again, but the chemical composition is what's actually giving the rock its cohesion. Here we see a lepidodendron root fossil, something that does turn up occasionally where at the boundary between coal and sandstone. The rest of the plant may have turned into coal or become coal in the process. An interesting fossil.